The morning sun cast long shadows across the green fields of Cathara as Zeftal walked through the grain crops. The tall, blue-skinned Viridian moved slowly between the plants, checking their growth with gentle hands. His forearms worked in perfect rhythm, testing soil moisture and examining leaves with the care his people were famous for throughout the galaxy. Cathara was a perfect world for the Viridians. The gravity was light, the air was clean, and the soil was rich. For 300 years, his people had built a peaceful colony here. They grew food that fed 12 star systems. Their art and music brought joy to billions of beings across the galaxy. They had never hurt anyone. The communication device on Zeftal's belt buzzed softly. He touched it with one of his lower hands while still examining a grain stalk with his upper arms. "Administrator Zeftal," came the voice of his assistant, Mulwin. "You need to return to the center immediately. We have received urgent news." Zeftal felt his heart sink. Urgent news was never good news. He began walking back toward the colony's central building, his long legs carrying him quickly across the fields. Around him, other Viridians continued their work, unaware that anything was wrong. The central building was buzzing with activity when he arrived. Viridians moved back and forth between computer stations, their normally calm voices filled with worry. Mulwin rushed to meet him at the entrance. "Administrator, we have detected a large fleet approaching our system," Mulwin said, his voice shaking. "The ships match hegemony military designs. They will arrive in 4 days." Zeftal felt cold despite the warm air. The hegemony was known throughout the galaxy as a collection of aggressive species who took what they wanted by force. They had been expanding their territory for decades, conquering peaceful worlds and enslaving their populations. "How many ships?" Zeftal asked. 47 combat vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts," Mulwin replied. "Our sensors show they are fully armed for planetary assault." Zeftal closed his eyes. Cathara had no weapons. The Viridians had never needed them. They had always believed that their peaceful nature and the protection of the Galactic Treaty would keep them safe. "Have you contacted the Benevolent Alliance?" Zeftal asked. The Benevolent Alliance was a group of peaceful species who had promised to help each other in times of crisis. The Viridians had been members for over 200 years. "Yes, Administrator. We sent emergency messages to all Alliance worlds 2 hours ago." Mulwin's voice became even quieter. "So far we have received 17 responses. All of them say they cannot help us." Zeftal felt his legs grow weak. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "What reasons do they give?" Mulwin pulled up the messages on his display screen. "The Altarians say their defense fleet is too small. The Centaurans claim they are having internal political problems. The Vegan Council says they cannot risk war with the hegemony over one colony world." "And the others?" Similar responses. "They all express sympathy for our situation, but none will send military aid." Zeftal stared at the screen showing the approaching hegemony fleet. Each red dot represented a warship designed for destruction. His people had no way to fight such a force. "Sir," called another assistant from across the room, "we're receiving a transmission from the hegemony fleet." "Put it through," Zeftal said. The main display screen activated, showing the scarred face of a reptilian creature. Its eyes were small and cruel, and its mouth was filled with sharp teeth. This was War Prince Kraktos of the hegemony, notorious throughout the galaxy for his brutality. "Viridian colony," Kraktos spoke in a harsh voice. "I am War Prince Kraktos. You will surrender your world unconditionally within 4 days, or we will take it by force." "War Prince," Zeftal said, standing up. "We are a peaceful people. We have done nothing to threaten the hegemony. Why do you want our world?" Kraktos laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your world has rich soil and perfect growing conditions. The hegemony has need of agricultural planets to feed our expanding empire. Your presence here is no longer convenient. But surely we can reach an agreement," Zeftal said desperately. "We can share our agricultural knowledge. We can provide food for your people while remaining on our own world." "The hegemony does not share," Kraktos replied. "We take what we need. You have 4 days to evacuate your population. Any Viridians remaining on the surface after that time will be eliminated. The transmission ended, leaving the control room in shocked silence. Zeftal turned to his staff. How many civilians are on Cathara? 2,400,000, Malwin answered. And how many transport ships do we have? 37 cargo vessels and 12 passenger transports. Even if we packed them beyond safe capacity, we could evacuate perhaps 300,000 people. The math was clear and terrible. Over 2 million Viridians would die unless help came from somewhere. Send another emergency message to all Alliance worlds, Zeftal ordered. Tell them we are facing complete extermination. Surely someone will help us. For the next 6 hours, messages went out across the galaxy. The responses came back quickly, but they were all the same. The Alliance members sent their sympathy and their regrets, but no ships. As the day turned to night, Zeftal stood in his office looking out at the lights of the colony. Viridian families were going about their evening routines, unaware that death was coming from the stars. Children played in the streets while their parents finished their daily work. Administrator, Malwin entered the office. We have prepared a planetary announcement. Should we tell the people what is happening? Zeftal nodded sadly. They have a right to know. They should have time to say goodbye to their loved ones. The announcement went out across all communication channels. Within hours, the colony was in chaos. Some Viridians demanded that they try to fight, though they had no weapons or military training. Others suggested trying to hide in the mountains or underground caves. Most simply held their families close and wept. That night, Zeftal could not sleep. He walked through the empty corridors of the central building, thinking about his failure to protect his people. The Viridians had always believed that being good and peaceful would be enough. They had been wrong. Near midnight, one of the night shift workers called out to him. Administrator, we're receiving a response to our distress signal. Zeftal rushed to the communication station. From which Alliance world? The worker looked, confused. It's not from the Alliance, sir. The signal is coming from the Outer Rim territories. The message is very short. Zeftal read the message on the screen. It was only 2 lines. Distress signal received and understood. Fleet en route. Estimated arrival in 3 days. Who sent this? Zeftal asked. The worker checked the signal. Data. The transmission signature shows it came from human space, sir. Zeftal felt his blood turn cold. Humans. The Deathworlders. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about humans. They came from a planet so dangerous that most species considered it uninhabitable. They were violent, unpredictable, and feared throughout civilized space. Are you certain? Zeftal asked. Yes, sir. The message definitely came from a human colony in the Outer Rim. Zeftal stared at the message. The humans were coming. But were they coming to help or to take advantage of the situation? Everyone knew that humans were aggressive and warlike. Perhaps they saw an opportunity to claim Cathara for themselves, while the hegemony was distracted. Sir, the worker said quietly, should we send a reply? Zeftal thought for a long moment. His people were going to die anyway when the hegemony arrived. Maybe the humans would be no worse than Kraktos and his warriors. At least some Viridians might survive if the humans wanted slaves instead of an empty planet. Send a reply, he said finally. Tell them we accept any assistance they can provide. The message went out into space, racing toward human territory at faster than light speed. Zeftal returned to his office and tried to rest, but his mind was full of questions. What did humans want? How many ships were they sending? Would they arrive in time to make a difference? The next morning brought more bad news. The hegemony fleet had increased speed and would arrive in 3 days instead of 4. War Prince Kraktos sent another message, even more threatening than the first. Viridian colony. His harsh voice filled the communication center. My scouts report that you have sent distress signals across the galaxy. Let me be clear. No one is coming to save you. The Alliance species are cowards who care only for their own safety. You are alone. and you will surrender or die. But Kraktos was wrong about one thing. Someone was coming. As the second day passed, long-range sensors detected ships approaching from human space. The vessels were moving faster than anything the Viridians had ever seen, pushing their engines beyond normal safety limits. "How many ships?" Zeftal asked. The sensor operator worked for several minutes before answering. "It's difficult to get an exact count, sir. The human ships are using some kind of stealth technology. But I estimate at least 20 vessels, possibly more. 20 ships against 47 hegemony warships. It seemed hopeless, but at least someone had answered their call for help. Someone had heard their distress signal and decided to act." As night fell on the second day, Zeftal gathered his senior staff for what might be their final meeting. "The human fleet will arrive tomorrow morning," he told them. "The hegemony forces will arrive 6 hours later. We don't know what the humans intend, but they are our only hope." "Sir," asked Mulwyn, "what if the humans are just as bad as the hegemony?" Zeftal looked out the window at the peaceful lights of his colony. "Then at least we will not die alone. At least someone in this galaxy cared enough to try." In the depths of space, the human fleet raced toward Cathara. Their ships bore the scars of countless dangers survived in the Outer Rim territories. Their crews were hardened by life on worlds that would kill most galactic species within hours. They had heard the Viridian distress call and they had made a choice. The Deathworlders were coming. News of the human response to the Viridian distress call spread across the galaxy faster than the ships themselves. In council chambers and military headquarters throughout civilized space, the same conversations took place in dozens of languages. The humans were coming. On the Altarian homeworld, High Counselor Vexara called an emergency meeting of the Defense Committee. The Altarians were a graceful species with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes. They had been among the first to decline helping the Viridians, citing their small defense fleet. "How many human ships are confirmed?" Vexara asked her military advisor. "Intelligence reports suggest at least 20 vessels, possibly 30, Commander Zilith replied. "They are moving at dangerous speeds, pushing their engines beyond recommended limits." "Dangerous speeds," Vexara repeated quietly. "That sounds like humans. What do we know about their capabilities?" Zilith activated a holographic display showing various human ship designs. "Very little reliable information, Counselor. Most of what we know comes from trader reports and second-hand accounts. Human vessels appear to be built for durability rather than elegance. Their hulls are thick and heavily reinforced. Built to survive their Deathworld conditions, no doubt," Vexara said with a shudder. The Altarians, like most civilized species, had heard the stories about Earth. When humans first made contact with galactic civilization 50 years ago, the survey teams were shocked by what they found. Earth was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, a planet so hostile that no known sentient species should have been able to evolve there. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere contained dangerous levels of oxygen that would burn the lungs of most species. Massive storms regularly swept across the continents with winds that could level buildings. The planet was covered with aggressive predators that hunted in packs. Even the plants were often poisonous or carnivorous. Worst of all, Earth's primary species seemed to thrive in these conditions. Humans had not just survived on their nightmare world, they had conquered it completely. "Sir," Zilith continued, "there are reports that human traders have been seen in hegemony space recently. Some analysts believe they might be working with Kraktos." Vexara felt a chill of fear. "You think the humans are responding to help the hegemony claim Cathara?" "It's possible. Deathworlders are known for their aggression and opportunistic behavior. They might see this as a chance to gain territory in civilized space." On the other side of the galaxy, similar discussions were taking place in the crystal spires of the Vegan Council. The Vegans were tall, thin beings who communicated, as much through changing colors in their translucent skin as through spoken words. They had built one of the most peaceful civilizations in the galaxy. Counselor Rayada flickered pale blue with worry as she addressed the emergency session. Our xenobiologists have completed their analysis of human behavioral patterns. The results are disturbing. The assembled counselors shifted nervously, their skin showing various shades of anxiety. Humans evolved through constant warfare, Rayada continued. Not just with their environment, but with each other. Their entire history is one of conflict, competition, and survival of the strongest. They divided their species into competing groups called nations and fought brutal wars for thousands of years. How brutal? Asked Counselor Melquin, his skin flickering orange with fear. Their archaeological records show they developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet multiple times over. They actually used nuclear weapons against their own species during their global conflicts. No civilized species has ever developed such destructive capabilities. The council chamber filled with horrified color displays as the Vegans processed this information. Furthermore, Rayada added, humans appear to have an unusual tolerance for violence. They create entertainment based on combat and conflict. Their literature celebrates warriors and conquerors. They even engage in ritualized fighting as a form of sport. Melquin's skin turned a deep red of alarm, and now these creatures are traveling toward Cathara with a military fleet. In hegemony space, War Prince Kraktos received the intelligence reports with amusement. He stood in the command center of his flagship, the destroyer's Fang, surrounded by tactical displays showing the approaching human fleet. 23 ships confirmed, reported his intelligence officer, an insectoid creature with multiple eyes. Mixed civilian and military vessels. Several appear to be converted cargo haulers and colony transports. Kraktos laughed, his reptilian features twisted with contempt. Colony ships and cargo haulers against the hegemony war fleet? These Deathworlders are even more savage and stupid than I thought. His second-in-command, General Thakmor, was more cautious. War Prince, should we be concerned about human technological capabilities? Their reputation suggests they are formidable fighters. Reputation, Kraktos spat, built on fear and stories told by cowardly traitors. Yes, humans come from a dangerous world. Yes, they are aggressive and violent, but savagery cannot defeat disciplined military might. The War Prince gestured to his tactical display, which showed the 47 ships of his battle fleet. Each vessel was a purpose-built engine of destruction, crewed by experienced warriors from a dozen conquering species. Look at their fleet composition, Kraktos continued. Converted civilian ships, outdated military vessels, no heavy dreadnoughts. They are either desperate fools trying to play hero, or they think they can scavenge something from the wreckage after we destroy the Viridians. What are your orders regarding the humans? Thakmor asked. Kraktos showed his sharp teeth in a predatory grin. We will demonstrate to the galaxy what happens when Deathworld savages interfere with the hegemony. After we claim Cathara, we will hunt down the human fleet and destroy them completely. Their burning ships will serve as a warning to others. But not everyone in the galaxy shared Kraktos's confidence. In the archives of the Galactic Historical Institute, Dr. Quanjal was reviewing old files about human first contact. The elderly scholar belonged to the Telthari species, beings known for their exceptional memory and analytical abilities. What he found in the records disturbed him greatly. The first human ship to make contact with galactic civilization had been an exploration vessel called the Pioneer. When galactic survey teams boarded the ship to make formal contact, they were amazed by what they discovered. The human crew lived and worked in conditions that would have killed most galactic species within hours. The ship's artificial gravity was set to Earth normal levels, which meant the humans were constantly experiencing forces that would crush the bones of lighter-built species. The air mixture contained oxygen levels that were toxic to most life forms. The temperature was kept at levels that most species would consider dangerously hot. Even more disturbing were the humans themselves. They were built like living weapons. Their bones were dense and strong, designed to support heavy muscle mass in crushing gravity. Their teeth were clearly evolved for tearing meat from prey animals. Their eyes faced forward like predators, giving them exceptional depth perception for hunting. But what had really shocked the survey teams were the humans' casual attitudes toward danger. When asked about life on Earth, They spoke matter-of-factly about natural disasters that regularly killed thousands of their own species. They described predatory animals that humans actually hunted for sport. They mentioned deadly diseases that humans had simply adapted to live with. One human crew member had shown the survey team scars from various injuries, animal attacks, equipment accidents, combat wounds from military service. The human spoke about these experiences as normal parts of life, never seeming to realize how horrifying they sounded to beings from peaceful worlds. Dr. Quanshell found video recordings of those early encounters. He watched human crew members, moving with an easy confidence that suggested they were completely comfortable with violence. They carried weapons as casually as other species carried communication devices. When asked about their military capabilities, they were disturbingly vague, as if discussions of warfare were too sensitive for outsiders. The most disturbing file contained recordings of human music and entertainment. The songs celebrated concepts like fighting for freedom and dying with honor. Their visual entertainment was filled with conflict, showing humans engaging in combat with weapons, vehicles, and even their bare hands. Dr. Quanshell closed the files and sat back in his chair. The humans had been mysterious when they first appeared 50 years ago, establishing colonies in the dangerous outer rim territories that no other species wanted. They traded with civilized worlds but kept to themselves, never joining any of the major galactic organizations. Now they were coming out of the outer rim with a war fleet, heading directly toward a conflict between the hegemony and helpless Viridians. The question was, what did they want? As the human fleet raced through hyperspace toward Cathara, similar questions were being asked in government buildings across the galaxy. Some species feared that the humans were planning to side with the hegemony and claim a share of the conquered territory. Others worried that the humans had their own plans for the Viridian colony. A few wondered if the humans might actually be planning to help the Viridians, but this seemed unlikely. Deathworlders were known for their self-interest and aggression. No species became the dominant life form on a Class 12 world by being generous and altruistic. In the depths of space, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable, watching the stars streak past. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring systems and calculating approach vectors. The Admiral was a tall woman with gray-streaked hair and scars on her hands from years of military service. She had fought in the outer colony wars, defending human settlements from pirates and hostile alien raiders. She had seen what happened to defenseless colonies when help didn't come in time. "Status report," she ordered. "Fleet is maintaining formation," reported her tactical officer. "All ships are pushing their engines to maximum safe speeds. Estimated arrival at Cathara in 18 hours. And the hegemony fleet? Still on schedule to arrive 6 hours after us. 47 combat vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts." Admiral Chen nodded grimly. Her fleet consisted of 23 ships, most of them retrofitted civilian vessels pressed into military service. Against a proper war fleet, they would normally have no chance. But Admiral Chen had been studying hegemony tactics for months, ever since intelligence reports suggested they might move against human outer rim colonies. She had a plan, though. It would require sacrifices that would horrify most civilized species. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Begin final weapons checks and prepare for combat operations. Make sure all crews understand the mission parameters." The mission was simple in concept, though deadly in execution. The humans were going to Cathara to evacuate as many Viridians as possible and to stop the hegemony from committing genocide. They would accomplish this mission regardless of the cost. As the fleet continued its desperate race through space, Admiral Chen thought about the choice her people had made. When the Viridian distress call reached human space, there had been no debate about whether to respond. The response had been immediate and unanimous. Someone was in trouble, someone needed help. Humans would answer the call. The Deathworlders were coming, but not for the reasons the galaxy expected. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Cathara system, like thunder breaking across a clear sky. 23 ships appeared in perfect formation, their hulls scarred and battle-worn, their engines glowing with the heat of maximum burn. On the surface of Cathara, Every sensor in the colony registered the massive energy signatures. In the central command building, Zeftal rushed to the communications center as alarms sounded throughout the complex. "Report," he called to the sensor operators. 23 ships, Administrator," replied the lead technician, his 4 arms, working frantically across multiple control panels. "They're broadcasting human identification codes. The lead ship is requesting permission to communicate." Zeftal felt his hearts racing. The humans had actually come. After 50 years of stories and rumors about the violent Deathworlders, they were here in his system. "Open the channel," he ordered. The main display screen activated, showing the bridge of a human warship. Zeftal had never seen a human in person before, and he was struck by how alien they looked. The human commander was tall and solid-looking, with short gray hair and intense eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "Cathara, Colony. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Fleet," the figure said. Her voice was calm and professional, but there was something underneath it that made Zeftal think of barely controlled violence. "We received your distress signal and have come to assist." "Admiral Chen," Zeftal replied, trying to keep his own voice steady. "I am Administrator Zeftal. We are grateful for your response, but I must warn you that a large hegemony fleet is approaching. They will arrive in approximately 6 hours with 47 combat vessels." Admiral Chen nodded as if she had expected this information. "We are aware of the hegemony force. How many civilians are on your world?" 2,400,000. Zeftal answered. "What is your evacuation capacity?" Zeftal felt his spirit sink. "We have 49 transport vessels. Even if we pack them beyond safe limits, we can evacuate perhaps 300,000 people." For a moment, Admiral Chen was silent. Then she turned to someone off-screen and spoke rapidly, in what Zeftal assumed was the human language. The harsh, clipped sounds were unlike any language he had ever heard. "Administrator," Admiral Chen said, turning back to the screen. "We are prepared to assist with evacuation operations. Our cargo vessels can carry additional passengers. We can also provide military escort for your transports." Zeftal blinked in surprise. "You're here to help with evacuation? Not to claim our world for yourselves?" Admiral Chen's expression became stern. "Administrator, we are here because you sent out a distress signal. No one deserves to die alone. We will evacuate as many of your people as possible and ensure their safe passage to wherever you want them to go." Relief flooded through Zeftal so powerfully that he nearly fell down. "Admiral, how many additional people can your ships carry?" "Our estimate is approximately 400,000, if we strip out all non-essential equipment and supplies. Combined with your vessels, we should be able to evacuate roughly 700,000 civilians." The math was still terrible. Over 1.5 million Viridians would be left behind when the hegemony arrived. But 700,000 lives saved was better than the total extinction they had been facing. "What about the hegemony fleet?" Zeftal asked. "Your 23 ships against their 47? Admiral Chen's expression became hard as stone. "Administrator, that is our concern. Your job is to get your people ready for evacuation. Our job is to make sure the transports get away safely." The transmission ended, leaving Zeftal staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff looked equally stunned. "Sir?" asked Mulwyn quietly. "Do you think they can do it? 23 ships against a hegemony war fleet?" Zeftal thought about Admiral Chen's face, about the controlled violence he had sensed in her voice. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out what Deathworlders are really capable of." Within minutes of the communication ending, human ships began moving throughout the Cathara system. Zeftal watched on his tactical displays as the alien vessels took up positions around his world with military precision. The human fleet was unlike anything he had ever seen. Most galactic civilizations built their ships to be beautiful as well as functional. Smooth curves, elegant lines, decorative elements that showed the artistic nature of their creators. Human ships looked like they had been built by people who expected to die. The hulls were thick and blocky, covered with additional armor plating that had been welded on over the original structure. Weapon hardpoints stuck out at odd angles, clearly added after the ships were originally designed. Every vessel showed signs of damage that had been repaired multiple times. These ships have been in many battles, observed his military advisor Kevnan. The Viridians had no military of their own, but Kevnan had studied galactic warfare as an academic subject. Look at their formations, Kevnan continued. They're not positioning themselves to defend the planet. They're setting up to engage the hegemony fleet in open space. As the hours passed, more details became clear. The human ships were not just positioning for battle. They were also preparing for evacuation operations. Cargo vessels moved into low orbit around Cathara, opening their holds to receive passengers. Military escorts took up protective positions around the transport craft. Most surprisingly, human shuttles began landing at the colony's spaceport. Zeftal watched through security cameras as the shuttle ramps lowered and humans stepped out. They were even more intimidating in person than on screen. The humans were heavily built, with thick bones and dense muscle mass that spoke of high-gravity evolution. They wore simple, practical clothing and carried weapons with the casual ease of a species that had never known peace. But their behavior was not what Zeftal had expected. The humans worked quickly and efficiently to set up evacuation procedures, but they treated the Viridians with surprising gentleness. They spoke softly to frightened children and helped elderly colonists toward the transport shuttles. One human, a woman with short brown hair and kind eyes, approached Zeftal directly. "Administrator," she said, "I'm Commander Lisa Park, in charge of ground operations. We need to prioritize evacuation groups. Children and elderly first, then essential personnel. We have approximately 4 hours before we need to start moving people off-world." "Only 4 hours?" Zeftal asked. "I thought the hegemony fleet wouldn't arrive for 6 hours. Commander Park's expression became grim. "The fleet might arrive early, and we need time to get the transports to a safe distance before the shooting starts." "Commander, can I ask you something?" Zeftal said. "Why are you doing this? Your people barely know us. Why risk your lives for strangers?" Commander Park was quiet for a moment, looking out at the Viridian families gathering at the spaceport. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said finally. "Because no one should have to face extinction alone. Because we've been where you are now, and we know what it feels like when no help comes." As evacuation operations began, Zeftal learned more about human capabilities. Their ships could carry far more passengers than seemed possible, cramming people into every available space. Their crew members went without food and sleep to make room for more Viridians. Most impressively, the humans had brought medical supplies and emergency equipment specifically chosen for Viridian physiology. Someone had taken the time to research what his people would need during an evacuation. "How did you know about our medical requirements?" Zeftal asked Commander Park. "We studied your species' biological data after receiving your distress call," she replied. "Humans are good at adapting quickly to new situations." As the third hour of evacuation passed, long-range sensors detected the approaching hegemony fleet. The enemy ships were still 2 hours away, but they were moving faster than expected. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system. "All evacuation teams prepare for immediate departure. The hegemony fleet has increased speed. We need all transports away from Cathara within the next hour." The pace of evacuation became frantic. Human crew members carried Viridian children in their arms while guiding elderly colonists toward the shuttles. Transport ships launched as soon as they were loaded, racing away from the planet toward the safety of deep space. Zeftal found himself torn between hope and despair. The humans were saving more people than he had dared to dream possible, but over 1 million Viridians were still on the surface, and there was no time to evacuate them. "Administrator, Commander." Park appeared at his side. "You need to be on the next shuttle. You're on the priority evacuation list." "I can't leave my people," Zeftal said. "I'm responsible for this colony." "Sir, with respect, your people need you alive, the evacuated. Survivors will need leadership in the refugee camps. You can't help anyone if you're dead." Zeftal looked around at the chaos of the evacuation. Human and Viridian crew members worked side by side, loading the last groups of civilians onto departing shuttles. In the distance, he could see the lights of the colony where over 1 million of his people waited for death. What about the Viridians who can't be evacuated? He asked. Commander Park's expression became hard. That's why Admiral Chen is here with 23 warships. We're going to make the hegemony pay for every life they take. As Zeftal's shuttle lifted off from Cathara's surface, he pressed against the window for one last look at his world. Below, the lights of the colony grew smaller and smaller. Above, in the darkness of space, he could see the running lights of the human fleet taking up battle positions. 23 human ships, most of them converted civilian vessels, preparing to face 47 hegemony warships in order to buy time for refugee transports to escape. The Deathworlders had kept their promise. They had come when the signal went out. But now they were about to face impossible odds against one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. In the command center of his flagship, Admiral Chen watched the last evacuation transports disappear into hyperspace. 730,000 Viridian civilians were now safe, racing toward refugee centers in Alliance space. Over 1.5 million remained on Cathara, waiting for the hegemony to arrive. "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, "hegemony fleet will arrive in 47 minutes. Admiral Chen nodded and activated the fleet communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Evacuation phase is complete. We are now moving to combat operations. Remember, our job is to make them pay for what they're about to do down there." Throughout the human fleet, crew members made final preparations for battle. Weapons were charged, shields were powered up, and emergency systems were activated. They all knew the odds. They all knew that few of them would survive the next few hours. But they also knew that they had already succeeded in their most important mission. Hundreds of thousands of innocent lives had been saved. War Prince Kraktos was about to learn what happened when you threatened helpless civilians while humans were in the neighborhood. The thunder was coming. The hegemony war fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 47 ships of death spreading across the void like a plague of metal and fire. At their center, the massive dreadnought destroyer's Fang led the advance, its hull bristling, with enough weapons to crack a planet. On the bridge of his flagship, War Prince Kraktos studied the tactical display with satisfaction. His fleet outnumbered the human ships more than 2 to 1, and his vessels were purpose-built instruments of war. This would be a short battle. "Report on the human fleet," he ordered his tactical officer. 23 vessels in defensive formation, around Cathara, came the reply. Mix of military and civilian ships. Several appear to be cargo haulers and colony transports retrofitted with weapons. Kraktos laughed, his reptilian features twisting with contempt. They brought cargo ships to fight the hegemony war fleet. These Deathworlders are even more primitive than I expected. His second-in-command, General Thakmor, pointed to another section of the display. War Prince. Long-range sensors show multiple hyperspace signatures departing the system. It appears the humans evacuated a significant number of Viridian civilians. So they are playing the hero, Kraktos mused. How touching. They will die for nothing. There are still over 1 million Viridians on the surface for us to eliminate after we destroy their pathetic rescue fleet. The hegemony fleet began its approach toward Cathara, weapons powering up and shields coming online. Standard hegemony doctrine called for overwhelming firepower applied quickly and brutally. The human fleet would be crushed in the first exchange of fire, but Admiral Chen had other plans. "All ships implement Plan Delta," she ordered from the bridge of the Indomitable. "Remember, we're not trying to win a fleet engagement, we're trying to cost them as much as possible." Throughout the human fleet, crews made final preparations for what would likely be their last battle. But there was no despair in their voices, no fear in their actions. They had already saved over 700,000 innocent lives. Whatever happened next, they had done their job. The first exchange of fire came when the fleets were still at extreme range. Hegemony ships opened up with their main batteries, sending streams of plasma and particle beams across the void. The humans responded with weapons that seemed crude by galactic standards: kinetic projectiles, nuclear missiles, and focused laser arrays. But War Prince Kraktos quickly discovered that human weapons had one critical advantage. They were designed by beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history trying to kill each other efficiently. The first human salvo targeted the hegemony fleet's sensor arrays and communication systems. Instead of trying to destroy enemy ships outright, the humans aimed to blind and isolate them. Nuclear warheads detonated in perfect formation, creating electromagnetic pulses that disrupted hegemony electronics. Clever, General Thakmore admitted, as his own ship's sensors flickered and went offline. They're using area effect weapons to disrupt our coordination. 3 hegemony cruisers found themselves cut off from fleet communications as human missiles swarmed their position. The human ships moved with a coordination that seemed impossible for such a small fleet, as if they were thinking with one mind. How are they achieving such precise formation flying? Kraktos demanded. Unknown warprints, their ships appear to be using quantum encrypted communications that our jammers cannot disrupt. What the hegemony commanders didn't understand was that human military doctrine had been forged in the hell of Earth's endless wars. Humans had learned long ago that the side with better communication and coordination usually won, regardless of raw firepower. Their ships carried communication systems that could function even under the worst conditions imaginable. The second phase of the battle began when human ships started using ramming attacks. The cargo hauler New Frontier, her hull packed with high explosives instead of trade goods, accelerated directly toward the hegemony battleship Cruel Victory. The enemy vessel's point defense systems destroyed the human ship's bridge and engines, but the New Frontier's momentum carried her forward on a collision course. Impossible, Kraktos snarled as he watched the display. Their crew should have surrendered when their ship was crippled, but the New Frontier's crew had no intention of surrendering. In the last seconds before impact, they detonated their improvised explosive cargo. The blast tore through the Cruel Victory's hull, sending the massive battleship spinning out of control with fires raging throughout its structure. The hegemony had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice entire ships in suicide attacks. Their tactics assumed that crews would try to preserve their vessels and their own lives. Humans had no such limitations. The converted mining ship Thunder Bay followed the New Frontier's example, ramming a hegemony cruiser and detonating her fusion reactor in a miniature star that lit up the void. The destroyer Promise Keeper used her mining lasers to slice through an enemy frigate's hull before being destroyed by concentrated fire from 3 hegemony ships. "This is madness," General Thakmore shouted, as another human ship exploded in a deliberate suicide attack. "They're throwing away their lives for nothing." But War Prince Kraktos was beginning to understand. Each human sacrifice was destroying or crippling a hegemony vessel. The exchange rate was not in the humans' favor, but they were making the hegemony pay dearly for their victory. Admiral Chen watched from her flagship as her fleet was systematically destroyed. Ship after ship disappeared from her tactical display, taking their brave crews with them into the darkness. But each loss bought time for the Viridian civilians to get further from Cathara. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we've lost 17 ships. Only 6 vessels remain combat effective." Status of the hegemony fleet? 11 ships destroyed, 14 more heavily damaged. War Prince Kraktos appears to be regrouping for a final assault. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. The human fleet had achieved something remarkable. They had destroyed or crippled more than half of a superior enemy force through sheer determination and tactical innovation. But the mathematics of war were unforgiving. 6 human ships could not stop the remaining hegemony vessels from reaching Cathara. "Signal all remaining ships," she ordered. "Final phase of Plan Delta. All vessels converge on the hegemony flagship." The last 6 human ships, the Indomitable, the frontier cruiser Dauntless, the converted freighter Iron Will, the colony transport Sanctuary, the mining vessel Deep Explorer, and the patrol boat Defiant, formed up for one last attack. War Prince. Kraktos saw them coming and laughed. 6 ships against 22. They still think they can win. But Admiral Chen wasn't trying to win anymore. She was trying to send a message. The human ships accelerated toward the center of the hegemony formation, weaving through defensive fire with desperate skill. The Defiant was the first to die, her small hull torn apart by plasma cannons. The Deep Explorer followed seconds later, her mining equipment exploding in a cascade of secondary fires. The Iron Will made it closest to the hegemony flagship, before concentrated fire from 8 enemy ships finally broke her apart. But her sacrifice allowed the sanctuary to slip through the defensive screen and ram the destroyer's fang directly amidships. The impact sent shockwaves throughout the massive dreadnought. On the bridge, War Prince Kraktos was thrown from his command chair as emergency lights flashed and alarms wailed. "Damage report," he snarled. "Multiple hull breaches, sir. Engineering reports that the main reactor is offline. We have fires on 17 decks." Admiral Chen's flagship and the Dauntless were the only human vessels left. Surrounded by the remaining hegemony fleet, they continued fighting with grim determination. "Admiral," reported her weapons officer, "we're down to 30% ammunition and our shields are failing." Admiral Chen looked at her display one last time. On the surface of Cathara, over 1 million Viridians were waiting for death. In deep space, the evacuation transports were now safely beyond pursuit. Her mission was complete, but she could still send one final message to the galaxy. "All remaining crew to escape pods," she ordered. "I'm taking the ship in." "Admiral, no," her tactical officer protested. "We can still fight." "This is not a debate," Admiral Chen replied firmly. "Get to the pods. That's an order." As her crew reluctantly abandoned ship, Admiral Chen sat alone on the bridge of the Indomitable. Around her, enemy fire hammered at her failing shields. Ahead of her, the crippled hegemony flagship struggled to bring its weapons to bear. She thought about the children who had made it safely to the evacuation transports. She thought about the Viridian families who were now free because humans had chosen to answer a distress call. She thought about what it meant to be strong enough to help those who could not help themselves. Admiral Chen pushed her engines to maximum power and aimed directly at the destroyer's fang. War Prince Kraktos saw the human flagship approaching and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The human admiral was bringing her ship in on a collision course, and with his main engines offline, he could not maneuver to avoid impact. "All weapons, target that ship," he screamed. "Destroy it before it reaches us." Every functioning weapon on the hegemony flagship opened fire. Plasma bolts and particle beams tore into the Indomitable's hull, ripping through armor and internal systems. But Admiral Chen's ship kept coming. In the last seconds before impact, Admiral Chen activated her ship's self-destruct sequence. The Indomitable struck the destroyer's fang and both vessels disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire that could be seen from the surface of Cathara. When the blast cleared, War Prince Kraktos was dead. His flagship was a drifting wreck. The hegemony fleet had been reduced to 15 battered ships, many of them barely space-worthy. The Battle of Cathara was over. General Thakmor, now the senior hegemony commander, stared at his tactical display in shock. In less than 3 hours, the human fleet had destroyed 32 hegemony warships and damaged most of the survivors. They had done this with converted cargo haulers and mining ships, using tactics that seemed to come from the nightmares of civilized beings. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Word of the battle is spreading through all the major communication networks." Thakmor activated the display and watched in growing horror as news reports filled the screen. Every major civilization was broadcasting footage of the Battle of Cathara. The galaxy was watching the aftermath of what humans had done to defend innocent civilians. But worse than the military defeat was the message the humans had sent. They had shown that someone would answer distress calls. Someone would stand up to bullies and tyrants. Someone would fight impossible odds to protect the helpless. On the surface of Cathara, the remaining Viridians waited for the hegemony ships to land and begin the slaughter. But the landing never came. The surviving hegemony vessels limped away from the system, their commanders too shaken and demoralized to continue the assault. Zeftal, safely aboard an evacuation transport heading for Alliance space, received word of the battle's outcome. Admiral Chen and her fleet were gone, but they had saved his world and his people. The hegemony had retreated in defeat. As he looked out at the stars, Zeftal thought about the humans who had given their lives for strangers. The galaxy had called them savage Deathworlders, creatures to be feared and avoided. They had been wrong. About everything. The thunder had come and it had changed the galaxy forever. 3 months after the Battle of Cathara, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Great Chamber on the neutral world of Concordia had never seen such tension, with representatives from dozens of species gathering to discuss what many were calling the most significant military engagement in galactic history. Ambassador Zeftal stood at the speaker's podium, his forearms steady, despite the magnitude of what he was about to say. The former colony administrator had become the official representative of the Viridian survivors, and his words would be broadcast across the galaxy. Honored representatives, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. 3 months ago, my people faced extinction. We sent distress calls to every member of the Benevolent Alliance begging for help against the Hegemony war fleet. An uncomfortable silence filled the chamber. Every species present knew that they had received those distress calls. Every species also knew that they had declined to help. 47 Hegemony warships approached our peaceful world with the intention of committing genocide, Zeftal continued. Over 2 million civilians waited for death while the galaxy's civilized species sent their regrets and best wishes. The Altarian representative, High Counselor Vexara, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Around the chamber, other diplomats avoided eye contact with the Viridian ambassador. But someone answered our call, Zeftal said, his voice growing stronger. The humans, the species you all fear and call savage Deathworlders, assembled a fleet and came to help us. They asked for nothing in return. They expected no payment or territory. They came because it was the right thing to do. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Near the back of the chamber, the human representative sat quietly, listening without comment. 23 human ships faced 47 hegemony vessels. Zeftal continued. The humans could have retreated when they saw the odds. They could have negotiated for their own safety. Instead, they fought and died to save as many of my people as possible. The main display screen activated, showing footage from the battle. The galaxy watched as human ships made deliberate suicide runs against superior enemy forces. They saw Admiral Chen's final attack, the moment when her flagship rammed the hegemony dreadnought in a ball of nuclear fire. 730,000 Viridian civilians are alive today because humans were willing to sacrifice everything for strangers, Zeftal said. The remaining survivors on Cathara are alive because the hegemony fleet was too damaged and demoralized to continue their attack. He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who had refused to help his people. I have come here today to ask a simple question. What does it mean to be civilized? The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Representatives spoke in dozens of languages, their voices overlapping in a chaos of sound. Council President Morden, an elderly being from the peaceful Centauran system, called for order. Ambassador Zeftal raises an important point, President Morden said when quiet had been restored. The humans' actions at Cathara have forced us to examine our own values and priorities. High Counselor Vexara rose from her seat, requesting permission to speak. President Morden, I believe we must address the obvious question. Why should we trust the humans? Yes, they helped the Viridians, but their methods were terrifyingly violent. They used suicide attacks and weapons of mass destruction. How do we know they won't turn that same violence against us? A new voice spoke from the chamber's human section. May I respond to that question? All eyes turned to Ambassador David Martinez, the human representative. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and the quiet confidence that seemed to characterize his species. Unlike most galactic diplomats, he wore simple clothing and carried no ceremonial decorations. You may address the council, President Morden said. Ambassador Martinez stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Counselor Vexara asks why you should trust humans. That's a fair question given our reputation. But I think you're asking the wrong question. He activated a holographic display showing star charts of the galaxy. The real question is, why did no one else come to help the Viridians? The display highlighted the locations of major Alliance worlds, all of which were closer to Cathara than the human Outer Rim territories. The Altarians have a fleet of 200 ships. Martinez continued. The Vegans have 300 vessels. The Centaurans possess over 500 military spacecraft. Any one of your species could have sent enough ships to defeat the hegemony. Fleet easily. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered this uncomfortable truth. But you didn't come, Martinez said simply. You were too afraid, too comfortable, too civilized to risk your own safety for others. So a colony of peaceful farmers had to rely on the galaxy's so-called savages for protection. Councillor Ray Ada of the Vegan Council rose angrily. That is unfair. We have built peaceful civilizations based on cooperation and non-violence. We cannot simply abandon our principles and become warriors. No one asked you to become warriors, Martinez replied. We asked you to protect innocent people from genocide. There's a difference. He gestured to the display showing battle footage. Every human ship that died at Cathara was crewed by volunteers. No one was forced to go. But when they heard that civilians were in danger, they dropped everything and rushed to help. That's what civilization means to us. Dr. Quanshal, the elderly Telthari historian, requested permission to speak. Ambassador Martinez, our records show that humans evolved on an extremely dangerous world through constant warfare. Your species is naturally violent and aggressive. How can you claim moral superiority when violence is simply your nature? Martinez was quiet for a moment, considering his response. Dr. Quanshal, you're right that humans evolved through conflict. We spent thousands of years fighting each other and our environment. We learned to be very good at violence. He paused and looked around the chamber. But we also learned something else, that strength without purpose is just destruction, that violence without justice is just brutality, that the strongest among us have a responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The human ambassador activated another display, this one showing footage from human colonies in the Outer Rim territories. The images showed humans working together to build settlements on dangerous worlds, sharing resources and protecting each other from environmental hazards. Yes, we're violent, Martinez admitted, but we're also the only species in the galaxy that has learned to channel that violence toward protecting others. When the Viridian distress call reached our space, nobody had to debate whether to respond. Nobody had to weigh the costs and benefits. We just went. Ambassador Zeftal spoke again from his position at the podium. Representatives of the Council, I have seen both sides of humanity. I have seen their capacity for violence, which is indeed terrifying, but I have also seen their capacity for sacrifice, which is beautiful beyond words. He activated his own display, showing recordings from the Cathara evacuation. The chamber watched as human crew members gave up their own food and sleeping quarters to make room for Viridian refugees. They saw human medics working around the clock to treat injured civilians from a completely different species. The humans didn't just die for us, Zeftal said. They lived for us. They cared for our children, comforted our elderly, and treated our wounded as if we were their own people. The debate continued for hours, with representatives from dozens of species expressing their views on humanity and the implications of the Battle of Cathara. Some argued that humans were too dangerous to be trusted. Others suggested that human military capabilities could be useful if properly controlled. But it was the representative from the hegemony who provided the most important perspective. General Thakmor had requested permission to address the Council via secure transmission. From hegemony space, his scarred reptilian features appeared on the main display, and his voice carried the weight of defeat. Council members, he said, I am the surviving commander of the fleet that attacked Cathara. I have come to speak about what I witnessed in that battle. The chamber fell completely silent. Nobody had expected testimony from the enemy forces themselves. War Prince Kraktos believed that the human fleet would be easy to defeat. Thakmor continued. We had superior numbers, better weapons, and purpose-built warships. We should have won easily. He paused, and pain was visible in his expression. But we had never faced an enemy that cared more about protecting others than preserving themselves. We had never fought beings who would sacrifice their own lives without hesitation to save strangers. The general's voice became quieter. In the hegemony, we measure strength by what you can take from others. The humans showed us a different kind of strength, the strength to give everything for those who cannot protect themselves. We had no defense against such an enemy. General Thakmore's image leaned forward, addressing the council directly. You debate whether humans can be trusted. I tell you that they are the only species in the galaxy that deserves to be trusted. They have proven that their strength serves justice, not conquest. After Thakmore's transmission ended, the council chamber was silent for several minutes. Representatives sat quietly, processing what they had heard from both their ally and their enemy. Finally, President Morden called for a formal vote on the proposal that had brought them together, an official invitation for humanity to join the Benevolent Alliance as a full member species. The vote was unanimous in favor, but when Ambassador Martinez was asked for humanity's response, he surprised everyone. The human government thanks the council for this generous offer, he said, but we must respectfully decline. Shocked murmurs filled the chamber. Why? Asked President Morden. Martinez smiled sadly. Because joining the alliance would require us to follow your rules, your procedures, your careful diplomatic processes. If we had done that 3 months ago, the Viridians would all be dead while we debated the proper response. He gestured toward the star chart still displayed in the chamber. There are thousands of worlds in the galaxy without protection. Pirates, slavers, tyrants, and worse prey on innocent civilians, while civilized species hold committee meetings to discuss the situation. The human ambassador's voice became firm with determination. We won't be part of that system. Instead, we'll continue doing what we did at Cathara. When someone sends out a distress call, when innocent people are in danger, when bullies threaten the helpless, we'll be there. As the council session ended, representatives from across the galaxy filed out of the chamber in thoughtful silence. Many of them were already planning to return to their home worlds with recommendations for increased military spending and more aggressive defense policies. The Battle of Cathara had changed everything. The galaxy's comfortable assumption that civilization meant avoiding conflict had been shattered by the example of beings who were willing to fight and die for justice. In the months that followed, long-range sensors began detecting human patrol fleets throughout the galaxy. They appeared wherever distress signals originated, wherever peaceful worlds faced threats from aggressive neighbors. The humans asked for nothing in return and accepted no thanks for their actions. They simply came when called, fought when necessary, and left when the job was done. Ambassador Zeftal returned to the refugee camps where his people were building new lives on Alliance worlds, but he carried with him a message that spread throughout Viridian communities and beyond. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were beings strong enough to protect the innocent and good enough to do it without asking for reward. The Deathworlders had come when the signal went out and the galaxy would never be the same. The thunder had passed, but its echoes would resonate forever among the stars. In the darkness of space, human ships continued their patrols, ready to answer the next distress call. Ready to prove again that true civilization was not measured by the absence of violence, but by the willingness to use strength in service of justice. The galaxy was safer because somewhere out there the humans were listening, and when the next signal went out, they would come.